All right, so today we're going to be looking at the 1987 murder of Gregory Ross in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And this case is really, really intense,
Yeah.
especially given the unusual murder weapon, a chainsaw.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But this case is really interesting because it kind of went from this gruesome crime
Right.
into like an urban legend.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to unpack a lot of the details today, but we're really going to be focusing on like the why behind it all.
Yeah, it's crazy how something can go from a horrific crime into almost like a cautionary tale
Right.
that's whispered throughout the community.
Exactly.
And it really speaks to like how much of an impact it had
Yeah, for sure.
on everyone.
And so this all starts with this really chilling discovery.
Okay.
On December 10th, 1987, kids were walking to PS 44 in Bedford, Stuyvesant,
Okay.
and they were taking a shortcut through this field behind the school,
Okay.
and they stumbled upon a garbage bag
Oh.
near a dumpster, and inside was a body.
Oh my.
Yeah, and this wasn't like a hidden decomposed body or anything. This was very deliberately placed near school.
Wow.
Almost like it was a message. And
Yeah.
even more shocking is that the body was missing most of its head.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine
Yeah.
the trauma that those kids experienced.
Of course.
So the police quickly follow this trail of blood
Oh.
from the body across the street
Mm-hmm.
to this basement that was known as like a shooting gallery,
Okay.
place where drug users would gather.
Gotcha.
And here's where the story takes a really fascinating turn.
Okay.
Inside that basement, amidst this pool of blood and an axe,
Wow.
the police find two people sleeping.
What?
Yeah, it immediately raised a ton of questions.
Yeah.
Like, were they just witnesses? Were they involved? What was
Yeah.
their connection to all this?
Yeah. What's going on?
It was a very confusing scene.
Wow.
And get this, those two individuals, despite being heavily under the influence of drugs at the time,
Oh, wow.
they became crucial witnesses.
Wow, that's amazing how
Yeah.
even in their impaired state they were able to provide information.
Yeah, and they were able to recount witnessing the murder.
Wow.
They described being paid to move the body,
Okay.
and even described seeing both a chainsaw and an axe being used.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and they also named the killer as Shelbourne,
Sure.
who was known to the police as Louis Emanuel,
Okay.
a local drug dealer.
So you have a victim found near a school, drug dealer as the suspected killer, and drug users as the witnesses.
Right.
So it's easy to assume this was just another drug deal gone wrong.
Exactly. You would think so.
Yeah,
But the motive is actually quite surprising.
really.
It was revenge, but not in the way that you might expect.
Okay.
Shelbourne's girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time,
Mm-hmm.
had been robbed while delivering drugs.
Okay.
And he was then given this terrifying ultimatum, produce the stolen money or the head of the thief.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it's like this impossible situation.
Ah,
And tragically, this is where Gregory Ross, the victim, enters the picture.
Yep.
He was a Bronx native and a National Guard veteran who had fallen on hard times. He was struggling with addiction
Okay.
and trying to make ends meet as the squeegee guy,
A squeegee guy.
washing car windows.
Oh.
And it's a heartbreaking case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
He was simply washing car windows when he was abducted and taken to that basement and murdered.
Unbelievable.
And the irony is just devastating because Ross's struggles with addiction
Right.
ultimately made him vulnerable and led him directly into the path of a man desperate to save himself.
Wow.
But even with a named suspect and witness statements,
Right.
this case wasn't open and shut.
Okay.
We have to remember, this was 1987.
Oh, right.
Investigative tools were much more limited back then.
Right.
They didn't have the advanced technology and databases that we have today.
Of course. Yeah.
Witness reliability was a concern.
Hmm.
Fear was pervasive in the community. And sharing information between police units wasn't as seamless.
Right.
Think about it. They relied on iCards to alert other units about wanted suspects.
Wow.
It seems incredibly archaic now.
Yeah, it really does.
So even though they had a strong idea of who committed the crime,
Right.
this case went cold.
Oh, wow.
Witnesses disappeared.
Yeah.
Shelbourne continued his criminal activities.
Mm.
And justice seemed out of reach.
Wow.
That must have been incredibly frustrating for everyone involved.
It really underscores that reality,
Yeah.
that justice is not always swift.
Right.
Sometimes it takes time, persistence,
Yeah,
and even a bit of luck for the truth to come to light.
for sure.
And in this case, it would take over 15 years for the case to be reopened.
Wow.
And a whole new set of challenges would emerge.
Oh my gosh. So more than a decade passes, and this case just sits cold.
Right.
And that's when Detective Mike Prate enters the picture.
Okay.
In 2003, he and his partner decided to tackle this infamous case that had haunted the precinct for years. What I find so impressive is how Detective Prate approached it.
Yeah.
He set out to almost rebuild the neighborhood from 1987.
Wow.
Painstakingly tracking down and verifying each witness and every lead from the original investigation.
That's some dedication.
Right.
He recognized that this wasn't just about finding names on paper.
Right.
It was about understanding the human stories behind them.
Exactly.
And those stories were often really complex.
Yeah.
And intertwined with, like, the realities of life on the streets.
Yeah. And Prate discovered that some witnesses had entered rehab right after the murder.
Oh, wow.
Trying to escape the trauma of what they had seen.
Yeah.
Essentially, they vanished from the system.
Right.
Others had moved, changed their names, built new lives for themselves, making them even harder to find.
Oh, my goodness. That sounds like an impossible task.
Yeah.
Trying to piece together a shattered mirror.
Right.
Especially with the challenges of time and circumstance. I mean, imagine contending with flooded evidence, warehouses, lost files, faded memories.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Talk about an uphill battle.
Seriously.
But then, just as they were making headway, they hit a major roadblock.
Okay.
Schaborn, who had been serving time on a federal narcotics charge, was nowhere to be found.
Oh, wow.
He had completely vanished from the prison system.
That's a twist.
It is.
Yeah.
Through unofficial channels, detectives eventually learned that Schaborn had become a federal witness.
A federal witness?
He had been proffered.
Proffered.
Meaning that he revealed information about his past crimes to the federal government in exchange for a reduced sentence.
Gotcha. So he was singing like a canary.
Right.
But about other crimes.
Right.
Not the chainsaw murder.
Right. And so the feds were keeping his location a closely guarded secret.
Oh, wow. So it's like a jurisdictional tug of war.
Exactly.
Local detectives wanting him for murder. And federal prosecutors needing him as a witness for a bigger case.
Right. I can't even imagine how those conversations went.
It's a fascinating clash of priorities.
Yeah.
You know, the U.S. attorney was understandably reluctant to jeopardize their own case.
Of course.
By exposing Schaborn's involvement in the Ross murder.
Yeah.
It raises questions about the balance between pursuing larger criminal networks and seeking justice for individual victims.
It does.
Yeah.
So Schaborn was essentially being protected by the feds.
Wow.
While the detectives trying to solve this brutal murder were left in limbo.
That's crazy.
But hold on, didn't he eventually slip up?
Oh, yeah.
I seem to recall a phone call.
You're exactly right.
Okay.
That phone call proved to be a pivotal moment in the case.
Okay.
From his federal prison cell, Schaborn called a family member in Brooklyn and incredibly admitted to the murder.
Oh, my gosh.
He even expressed surprise that any witnesses were still alive.
Wow. So this was a game changer.
I bet.
As word of this call spread like wildfire through the community.
Like a ghost from the past coming back to haunt everyone.
Exactly. And I bet the fear that had been simmering under the surface for all those years came rushing back full force.
Absolutely. And the consequences were immediate.
Yeah.
Witnesses who had initially agreed to cooperate with detectives started to get cold feet.
Oh, no.
They were terrified of what might happen to them or their families if they testified against Schaborn, even though he was behind bars.
It's a chilling reminder that fear doesn't always dissipate.
Right.
Even when the perpetrator is incarcerated.
Wow.
So what happened next?
Okay.
With renewed fear gripping the community.
Right.
Could the detectives finally get their man?
Well, Detectives Prate and his partner had painstakingly rebuilt their case.
Okay.
But the shadow of fear loomed large.
Right.
Prosecutors had a really difficult decision to make.
Yeah.
Would the witnesses actually testify in court?
Right.
Could they secure a conviction relying solely on shaky witness testimonies?
Yeah.
Especially with no physical evidence linking Schaborn directly to the murder.
So they were caught between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
The weight of justice for Gregory Ross on one side, and this very real threat of retaliation on the other.
Wow, what a dilemma.
That's when the possibility of a plea deal entered the equation after much deliberation and with the support of Ross's family, who were desperate for some form of closure. Prosecutors made the difficult decision to offer Schaborn a deal.
A deal.
He could plead guilty to manslaughter, a lesser charge.
Wow.
In exchange for a reduced sentence.
For a chainsaw murder, that doesn't seem like nearly enough.
I know.
Yeah.
It's definitely a tough pill to swallow.
Right.
Especially considering the brutality of the crime.
Of course.
However, it's important to consider the context.
Right.
The strength of the case hinged entirely on those witness testimonies, which were inherently fragile due to fear and the influence of drugs at the time of the murder.
Yeah.
Taking the case to trial was a gamble.
Right.
There was a very real possibility of a mistrial or even an acquittal.
So in a way, it was a compromise.
Yeah.
A way to ensure at least some accountability without risking everything on a trial that might not deliver justice for Gregory Ross and his family.
Exactly. And still knowing he served only a fraction of time for such a horrific crime, it leaves you with this sense of unease.
Absolutely. It brings to light the complexities of the criminal justice system.
For sure.
Sometimes the pursuit of justice involves compromises that might not feel entirely satisfying, but offer a measure of closure and accountability within the constraints of the legal system.
Yeah, it's hard not to feel conflicted about the outcome.
Yeah.
You know, it highlights how fear can have a lasting impact.
On a community, influencing not only witness testimonies, but the very course of justice itself.
You're absolutely right. This case serves as like a stark reminder that the consequences of a crime often extend far beyond the immediate victim. It leaves these scars on the community, shaping perceptions, influencing behaviors, and even impacting the way justice is pursued.
And in a way, Schaborn did serve his time. But the story didn't end there.
It didn't.
This chainsaw murder continued to circulate, becoming this cautionary tale, this grim reminder of the darkness that can exist just below the surface, even in familiar places.
What makes this case so compelling is how it blurs the lines between fact and fiction, between the brutality of a real-life crime and its transformation into an urban legend. That continues to resonate within the community.
Yeah, we began this deep dive acknowledging the gruesome nature of this crime.
But as we explored the details, the context, the human stories behind the headlines, it became clear that this case is about so much more than just the sensationalism of a chainsaw murder.
It's a story about the destructive power of fear. The complexities of the criminal justice system, and this enduring search for justice in a community grappling with violence and its aftermath.
And it leaves us with some thought-provoking questions to consider.
It does.
How does the concept of an urban legend intersect with the reality of a crime? How does fear shape not only individual lives, but also the very pursuit of justice itself? These are questions that challenge us to look beyond the surface and delve into the complexities of crime and its enduring impact on individuals and communities.
Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. But this has been a really interesting deep dive into this case.
Thanks for joining us.